I still remember the day I first saw the cabin in the woods. It wasn't the kind of place you'd find in a glossy travel brochure. It was remote, old, and worn by years of abandonment, but to me it was perfect. After years of working in a stuffy office, the solitude of the mountains seemed like the answer to everything I needed. Time away, time to think, and maybe a chance to start writing again. But in the end, the cabin had other plans for me. From the outside, the cabin seemed harmless enough. The paint had peeled, the wooden steps creaked under my weight, and the windows, clouded with dust, barely reflected the forest that loomed around it. There was something off about the woods, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The trees grew too close together, their branches twisting like skeletal hands reaching for something unseen. And the wind that filtered through the pines didn't sound right. It carried a whisper, faint, almost imperceptible, but always there. At first, I thought it was just my imagination. The first few days passed quietly. I unpacked my things, cleaned up the cabin, and tried to settle into a routine. Every morning, I would venture into the woods, the crisp mountain air filling my lungs. The forest was beautiful in its own wild, untamed way. The tall pines stretching up toward the sky, the soft crunch of leaves and pine needles underfoot. Sunlight would filter through the dense canopy, casting dappled patterns on the forest floor, and for a moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. I would walk for hours, losing myself in the sound of the wind rustling through the branches and the occasional bird song. There was something timeless about the woods, as if they had been untouched by human hands for centuries. The quiet solitude of it all was calming, almost meditative, but even then there was an underlying tension, like the forest was watching me, waiting. At night, the silence of the forest was overwhelming. The kind of silence that presses in on you, making you aware of every breath, every heartbeat. But soon it wasn't silent anymore. It started with the whispers, just outside the window. Too quiet to make out any words, but persistent enough to keep me up at night. By the third night, I was sure I wasn't alone. I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the porch, slow and deliberate, as if someone was pacing just outside. I shot up in bed, heart racing, and grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a rusted fire poker that had come with the cabin. I didn't dare turn on the lights. Instead, I crept toward the window, the whispers swirling around me like a gathering storm. The footsteps stopped just before I reached the window. I waited, holding my breath. When I finally peered out, there was no one there. Just the trees swaying in the wind and the faint glow of the moon through the branches. My mind was playing tricks on me, I thought. I was tired, overworked. Maybe the isolation was getting to me. But as I turned away from the window, I heard something new. A soft tapping sound, rhythmic, coming from inside the cabin. From the walls. I froze. The tapping was subtle but unmistakable. It seemed to travel along the walls as if something, or someone, was inside, moving through the very structure of the cabin. My first instinct was to run, but where? The cabin was miles from the nearest town, and it was pitch black outside. I'd be wandering blindly in the woods with no cell reception and no flashlight. Instead, I decided to face it. Gripping the fire poker tighter, I made my way to the corner of the room where the tapping was loudest. As I approached, the sound stopped, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. I knelt down, pressing my ear to the floorboards, hoping to hear anything that might give me a clue as to what was going on. That's when I heard it, a voice. Muffled but unmistakable. A woman's voice, pleading from beneath the floor.
"Help me."
I stumbled back, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice came again, clearer this time.
"Please. Help me."
I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some sort of old plumbing or vent playing tricks on my ears. But deep down I knew better. There was something, or someone, trapped beneath the cabin. The realization sent a shiver down my spine. I had to get out of there. But as I rushed toward the front door, the whispers returned, louder now, more insistent. They surrounded me, pressing in from all sides, filling the room with unintelligible words. The cabin felt alive, its walls closing in on me. The fire poker slipped from my hands as I collapsed to my knees, clutching my head, trying to drown out the noise. Then, as quickly as they'd started, the whispers stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I staggered to my feet, gasping for breath, and that's when I saw it. Carved into the floorboards beneath me, just where I'd heard the voice, was a name. Anna. I don't know what possessed me to start tearing up the floor, but I couldn't stop myself. I dug my fingers into the old wood, pulling up the boards one by one until a small dark space appeared beneath. The air that escaped was stale, like something that had been sealed away for decades. And there, lying in the dirt, was a skeleton. I recoiled in horror, my mind reeling. The bones were fragile, half buried in the earth, as if whoever it had been trapped there for years. And among the bones, clutched in a bony hand, was an old, weathered locket. I picked it up, my hands trembling, and opened it. Inside was a photo of a woman. Anna, I assumed, but what sent a jolt of terror through me wasn't the image. It was the fact that I recognized her. She looked exactly like me. I stumbled back, my head spinning. This was impossible. I tried to rationalize it, to come up with any explanation that didn't involve the impossible. But before I could, the whispers returned. Louder, this time more urgent.
Join us.
I dropped the locket and ran for the door, but it slammed shut in my face. The whispers grew into a cacophony, filling the cabin, echoing off the walls. I pounded on the door, screaming, but it was no use. The walls seemed to pulse, like the heartbeat of some terrible ancient creature. And then, I felt it, a hand on my shoulder. Cold, skeletal fingers wrapping around me, pulling me back toward the hole in the floor.
Join us.
The voices repeated, and I knew then that they weren't going to let me leave. Not alive. The last thing I saw before the darkness closed in was the cabin itself, shifting, warping, like it was alive, breathing, feeding. And then I understood. The cabin wasn't haunted by spirits. It was the spirit itself. And now, I was part of it too. I don't know how long I've been here now, trapped beneath the floor with Anna and the others. And every night the whispers start again. It wasn't until the cabin claimed me fully that the truth began to surface, creeping in like the cold dampness of the woods. There was something about the memories, the ones that didn't quite line up, the days that seemed to slip by like a blurred dream. A fragment of a moment, half forgotten, drifted back to me. That first day I had gone into the woods to explore, to stretch my legs after hours of driving. I remembered it now, the wrong turn I had taken, how the path disappeared behind me, and the sun had dipped below the trees faster than I expected. The sudden sharp pain in my chest, the way the air had felt thick and heavy as I stumbled in the darkening woods. I remembered falling, collapsing on the damp forest floor, gasping for breath, my vision tunneling as the world went black around me. The sharp sting of pine needles and the overwhelming sense of finality, like something ancient and hungry, had latched onto my soul. But then I remembered getting back up, wandering out of the woods and returning to the cabin, shaken but alive. Or so I had thought. It hit me with brutal clarity now. I hadn't made it out of those woods alive. I had died that day, lost somewhere among the trees. What had come back to the cabin wasn't really me, but a shadow, a ghost that the cabin had welcomed, just as it had done with Anna and who knows how many others. The whispers had been calling to me from the start, guiding me to my fate, and I hadn't even realized it. Time doesn't exist here. Not the way it used to. But every night I hear them, new people, just like I was, stumbling into the cabin thinking they found a quiet escape.